Random Thoughts takes us to close to mid-season 4, where Janeway announces that they have been having shore leave on the Mari homeworld.
Been doing a little shopping.
It's a present for B'Elanna.
What is it?
Well, it's sort of personal.
Of course, say no more.
Yep, this is early days for the Tom-Torres relationship, but that just means that there's time to savor it, you shippers. So, back to the episode.
I'm on my way for a little romantic rendezvous myself.
Say no more, please.
I haven't been with anyone since Cass, and I'm feeling a little rusty.
We've only got about a dozen or so episodes left, and I fear that they're all going to involve Neelix's sex life.
The best advice I can give you is to just be yourself.
I agree, that should give the ladies ample warning to reach for their mace. What we discover about the Mari is they are a race of telepaths, as shown when they are trying their best to haggle with Quill over a part that they like. But some clumsy dick runs into Torres, and not just like a bump, he gives her knee a once-over like she owes his boss money. Speaking of painful things, she's sent to go collect Neelix while Janeway counts out the money.
Neelix? Why do you want me to tug on your whiskers?
I had a chimney that I didn't know exist fall through my ceiling. That is now the second worst thing that's happened to me this year. As far as Tuvok is concerned, the real story is Namira, who is the cop around here, but pleasantly boasting that things are going so well, she'll likely be out of a job because of how non-violent they've become.
Oh, this will teach you to watch where you're going, you idiot! You idiot!
It became much easier once we changed the definition of violent.
Why? Why were you beating that man?
I don't know.
My world and welcome to it. After the titles, we see that Tuvok is showing Namira around on Voyager and introduces her to the brig. She finds it a rather absurd idea to shut someone away as punishment, and in an effort to rehabilitate. But look, it works so well, he says from the land of the free that has 2.1 million people behind bars. Well, they get called down because of that attack, and Namira says that she wants Janeway, Torres, and Neelix to answer some questions.
Let me get this straight. Not only are you going to read my mind, you're going to record my thoughts. Yes.
Well, aren't you going to be in for a surprise? May want to check the fuses on that computer of yours there. Make sure they can handle what this noggin's going to throw at them. So, this means we'll be peeking into the minds of...
What else would I be thinking about?
You know, I am fully aware that I have the most awesome job in the world. I just wonder sometimes if whoever runs Karma that tries to balance that is busy carrying a box and operating the controls with their elbows, so they can't make the fine adjustments they're supposed to. So all of a sudden I've got to deal with Neelix's sexual fantasies or the chimney of surprise. Anyway, this all goes back to the guy that stumbled into Torres. She had a momentary thought that she'd like to kick the idiot's ass, but that was all that it was. But Namira acts like Torres just threw a brick at Betty White while screaming the C word, and announces that she is going to be arrested. Turns out that Namira is literally the thought police. They have outlawed violent thoughts so that it can't lead to other people hearing those thoughts and then committing violent acts. So the guy who did the beating is not responsible. Torres is responsible for having the original thought.
What happens to B'Elanna now?
We have an enlightened penal system here.
Oh, shit. It's that bad, huh? Oh, never a good sign when law enforcement brings up how awesome the system is. That usually means people are getting kicked in the streets for the crime of didn't like their face. Thanks to the mumbling, convoluted plotline here, what we're supposed to be getting is that Torres is going to have her bad thoughts purged, saying that it is necessary to deal with the guy who did the ass-kicking. However, what we're going to find out is that they won't need to do that. Everything will work out fine without the procedure. Sorry to spoil it for you there. But anyway, what that means then is, thanks to the many, many rewrites, whatever motivation that there might be to make this absolutely necessary in order to deal with, it is now simply a case that Torres has broken this law and had this thought that she's not supposed to have. In their society, their rehabilitation would be to remove that thought because, guess what? The people on this planet live on this planet. This does not apply to B'Elanna Torres. Now, the thing to note is Namira keeps going on and on about the superiority of their system over incarceration, because she says it's all about rehabilitation. Now, the issue of punishment versus rehabilitation is obviously a very important one. What is the purpose of the penal system? Naturally, this will get no consideration whatsoever. The reason for the title Random Thoughts is not because it's caused by Torres' random thought, but rather because this episode is a hot mess of random thoughts. There's a whole lot of stuff in here, and it forms a great big stew of bullshit. So to examine the issue of rehabilitation for a moment, the purpose, after all, is because these people live here and they have to participate in this society. This does not apply to B'Elanna Torres, meaning that the same consequence, even a superior consequence to this, rather than doing this engram thing, would be to send Torres up on Voyager and tell her, never come down again. Because after all, even if you do this, maybe she'll have another violent thought later on. But if you send her up to the ship and say don't come back down, it won't matter if she does, will it? So, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the memory purge thing. Now, the thing about rehabilitation is that the first two things I think of anyway when it comes up is first, that it's pragmatic. If you can turn a criminal into a productive member of society, then you have accomplished something positive. Society no longer has a negative dragging it down, it has a positive lifting it up. And second, that it is more compassionate. It is about helping the person to become a better person. Neither of those are being served by the idea of carrying out this procedure on B'Elanna Torres. And once you eliminate that, then there's only two other explanations for why you would do it anyway. One, you are blindly following the law even when it doesn't make sense. Or, it's about punishment, isn't it? I mean, I'm just saying that I fail to see where the moral high ground lies, and look, we'll all just feel a lot better knowing that someone we will never see again had their brain screwed with.
Will you at least delay the procedure until we've had a chance to review the evidence? Will you?
It'll take us about a day to reconfigure our instruments. That's all the time I can give you.
Yeah, the last thing you'd want to do is be in any way accommodating with the warship that's orbiting your planet. Likewise, Janeway tells Tom that if push comes to shove, she's going to let them do this to Torres. Yep. She says they can't pick and choose the laws they obey, to which I say, yes, you can when certain lines are crossed. Justice on TNG, and you really must suck if justice makes more sense than you do. Justice showed that the most rah-rah pro-Federation ideal captain in his most Roddenberry idealistic state says this is a pile of horse shit. Sorry, Tom. I'd love to help out, but I can't bend the rules, you know. Yes, you can. You do it all the time. You bent the rules for the Akampa. You bent the rules for the people being exploited by the Ferengi. You bent the rules for the frickin' Borg. Well, yeah, but those were serious matters, Tom. I mean, this is just whether or not they're going to do brain surgery on your girlfriend. I mean, what's the big deal? So you'll bend the rules for everyone except the crew that you say you're so dedicated to protecting? Are you seriously suggesting that you can persuade me with my own words? You know how capricious my whims are, Tom. I am legendary for doing what I like. I'm like the Gilgamesh of fucking with people. So, Tom goes to Chakotay, who as a Maquis would naturally want to make sure the people that he brought here, especially a good friend of his like Torres, would be allowed to be sacrificed in the altar of twisted ideology by letting them screw with the very thoughts that define her. So he tells Tom to put together a rescue plan if it looks like diplomacy will fail. And considering Neelix is handling the diplomacy, I think we can already call that a certainty of failure. This is a man whose survival skills kill people. This is a man who gave the ship fleas. This is a man whose cooking nearly destroyed Voyager. This is a man who managed to fuck up being dead. Janeway and Tuvok go over the data and discover that the attacker is a habitual harbinger of violent thoughts and could have been acting on something other than what Torres did. Plus, there's the fact that he's named Fring, for crying out loud. He's named after a guy who once cut his employee's throat open with a box cutter. But Namira is defensive at the suggestion that she might be wrong. And thanks to this enlightened justice system, the investigator is also the judge. So, she can just say, "Nuh-uh, I'm right," scramble her brain. And nothing can be done about that. This isn't commented on because it would get in the way of Seven and Neelix arguing about Voyager's clumsy approach to exploration in the very next scene.
What you call ignorance, we call exploration.
I like that. It means that I can ignore a topic and say I'm exploring it. I'll take it. Let's explore Neelix's ideas and go on to what follows. The woman that Neelix is interested in is the next victim. After a little accident, the woman who's shopping there suddenly grabs a knife and delivers the coup de grace. Horrifying that this has become a murder, but accurate since coup de grace literally means a blow of mercy, so she is now spared from touching Neelix. Well, Namira comes back cap in hand, hoping for help in this murder investigation. And, yeah, I can see why, because basically this is like handing a hostage negotiation over to a mall cop. Well, whoever coined the phrase "no good deed goes unpunished" must have met Namira, because not only does she come on here and act this way to get Tuvok to come down there and not do anything to help Torres, but when Tuvok winds up going missing later on, she will prohibit anybody to help look for him. One thing this episode proves is that just because you have telepathy doesn't mean you have empathy. Anyway, Tuvok gets permission to mind meld with Torres to focus on the events around the incident with the clumsy guy. But during that, she reveals that she had a creepy encounter with Quill. Oh yeah, by now I should mention the guy's name is actually pronounced Gwill, but I thought he was way too creepy to be named anything other than Mr. Quill like on Doctor Who, so I'm going to stick with Quill. He's intrigued with Tuvok's subconscious thoughts since they're dark and violent, and it seems that he is a broker in forbidden thoughts. I mean, well, violent ones anyway. I don't know if there's any more to the collection of that, like, my daughter's friend has a nice ass, or I really don't care whether or not we do well in the Olympics, or I hope I can get tickets to see Bill Cosby when he gets out of prison. Anyway, Tuvok says he wants to explore the dark thoughts that he suppresses, and Quill said he could help him out with that. Plus, Quill is very anxious to see them himself, so he throws caution to the wind and agrees. But once Tuvok's got enough to convince Namira, he tries to bring Quill in, but instead he finds himself in a fight with him and a couple of his customers, so now he's out of the picture, and Namira, as established, will not let them come down to search in order to avoid any further violent thoughts potentially being released. Well, in one sense, this is indeed logical, and would be consistent assuming we beamed up Torres right away, but no. How about if we keep her down here, and also, how about, since we're really concerned about violent thoughts here, I suggest we piss her off as much as possible. Yeah, that won't create any violent thoughts, will it? Honestly, Namira, you don't know the first thing about being a Klingon, do you? So, realizing the futility of this, they sedate her, strap her in, and then point the nasty device at her head. The nasty device, by the way, is my new favorite horrible prop, because this thing is so cheaply made that it's all floppy when they try to move it in place, which is not helping the fact that it looks very much like they're trying to fix her brain with a light-up dildo. I mean, it's even got a little bit of a droop to it Just watch.
Proceed.
This brings a whole new meaning to the term mind-fucked. Meanwhile, Quill still wants the dark thoughts, so Tuvok does a mind meld to really lay it on him, which eventually allows him to escape, tell Voyager what's happening so they can stop the procedure before it gets too far. Tuvok explains that Torres was intentionally provoked into that thought in order for it to be taken and sold. As they explain, if you try to ban thoughts, all you do is encourage people to share them in hiding. This has led this to be considered an analogy for everything from marijuana to hate speech. So the interpretation is up to the viewer, and I will completely leave that up to you because I do not care enough. I just want to close this one out.
Whether his arrest will lead to reforms in the Mare justice system is anyone's guess.
I'm going to guess the answer is a big fat no. In the coda, Tuvok admits to Torres that he's gained a newfound respect for her control, considering the degree to which she is being subjected to violent imagery and such, and how little she actually expresses it these days, compared to how she was at the beginning. Although we haven't seen Carrie lately, he could have been stuffed in a locker for all we know. Oh, and also, Seven shows up in the ready room for a clear-cut scene added into the story to shoe in that we have a Borg on board. Yeah, I don't even get into that. Let's just get out of here. Post-episode follow-up. Stupid Neelix's moment is me having to watch his whiskers get teased. I don't care how you debate me on that one. It is the winner. Probably a controversial view, but I'm giving this a score of 4 out of 10. Some people like it, but I just feel it's a big hot mess. This episode is central to Torres' violent thought, yet she is marginalized in it. It's actually a Tuvok episode. Now, I don't object to it being a Tuvok episode, and Russ plays the part with the exploration of his darkness well, but it's just too little too late. This thing is just such a typically sweaty, fumbly outing that I just thoroughly am underwhelmed. I know there are issues that I could talk about with it, but I just don't care enough to. This episode is just smothered by its own inadequacies. It's just so weak. It's so determined to get to where it wants to go that it doesn't make the journey seem realistic, and the destination, this ain't really worth it. Like I said, Random Thoughts is well named because it describes what the script clearly is.
All hail your